Hello, friends. How's it going? It's Matt. You listen to Looking Sideways Action Sports podcast, the show where I try and uncover the most fascinating stories in action sports and other related endeavours. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoy this one. I'm back after a couple of weeks off, actually. Ended up having another one of those unscheduled breaks for a fortnight or so, partly because the Looking Sideways book project has stepped up a gear. So whatever spare time I have had has been busy with that, but also partly because it turned out I just needed a little bit of a break from it. You know, since the start, nearly 4 years in, been quite a lot of work putting this thing out, and you know, every now and again I just need to not do it for a bit to ensure that it doesn't become a millstone or a proper bane, which is what happened. Not that it became a proper bane, but you know, I was just making sure, a bit of self-care, you know, to make sure that it doesn't. Anyway, when I finally did get my shit together once again to record another episode, I got in touch with my friend Valeria, who's somebody I've been meaning to speak to for donkey's years. Now, before I get into the specifics, let me just say that I'm still not 100% confident of my ability to pronounce Valeria's surname correctly. So I sent her a WhatsApp asking her how I pronounce her name properly. And in reply, she sent me a voice note that I'm just going to reproduce here so that we're all clear.
Valeria Kechichian.
Got that? Nice. Anyway, Valeria, quite a story this one, encompassing as it does some classic Looking Sideways themes that have been evolving since the beginning of the podcast, really. For the past decade, she's been one of the driving forces behind the Longboard Girls Crew, which during that time has grown to become one of the biggest communities in action sports. And now she's stepping aside from that role to focus fully on running new non-profit Longboard Women. And that organisation is going to be using longboarding, arts and educational programmes to create change in disadvantaged communities around the world. As you might imagine from that brief précis, Valeria is a proper force of nature, and her story is a fascinating and inspiring combination of the large and the small. I nearly said the micro and the macro, but that's the type of wanky deep dive-esque phrase that we all hear way too much of on these podcasts. Anyway, my point is that Valeria's story tells us that by living authentically and honestly, you can use your own transformative story to create change on a larger level, the large and the small, you see. It's even more of an achievement when you listen to some of the industry-inspired obstacles she's had to negotiate on the way. There's one particular story which is fairly disheartening, but Valeria's response to it is heartening, let's say. Anyway, big thanks to Valeria for this one. I think it's fair to say we both really enjoyed this chat. Great to catch up, and thanks for not being too annoyed when I rescheduled our chat a couple of times because we had good surf at the ship pipes. Sorry about that. I'll be back at the end. In the meantime, here's my chat with Valeria, a sign from the universe. Enjoy. Cool. So apart from that, how you doing?
Apart from the collapse of the current system and the total chaos, apparent chaos we live in, I'm great.
We just got the COVID chat out of the way off air early on. It's such a cliche of these things at the minute, though, isn't it? It's like, hey, how's your year going? And how's you know, what's your take on this? But you just moved back to Spain, right?
Yes, I moved back to Spain a year ago. I was living on the road. But
you're in Argentina. You're in Argentina.
No, I was in Argentina because I went there to do a campaign with Nike, and 4 days after I arrived,
you got stuck.
It was the famous week that everything went down. So 4 days after me arriving, they said, you come from Spain, you cannot go to the events you came to do. And the day after, they say the campaign is canceled. And the day after, they said borders are closed. So I got stuck in Argentina for 5 months. Yeah.
In Buenos Aires?
In Buenos Aires, yes.
How's that?
It was okay. It's just Buenos Aires at the moment, Argentina had the longest quarantine of the world. So we've been basically, yes, 5 months indoors. Yeah, it was a special time.
Yeah, unscheduled little return then. And
yes.
Right. So you got the place in Mallorca, right?
In Mallorca, yes, at the moment, yes.
And so you got that place a year ago. And then,
1 year ago, yes. The years before, I've been living on the road for 3 years. And and now not really traveling, just basically going wherever I had free accommodation. So, and working from any place. And 1 year ago, I decided to settle back somewhere. And I chose Mallorca because I had mountains and beach and nature. And I'm literally in the middle of nowhere. And that makes me very happy at the moment.
Had you spent much time there before? Like, was that quite a random choice, or?
It was really, really random. So I've been here like some years ago, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago. It was the last time I've been in Mallorca. But I don't know, I just heard a little voice. I don't want to sound too mystical, but that's the truth.
Sound away.
And I was like, I thought of Mallorca, and then a couple of weeks I was like, okay, I was telling the universe, okay, let's see if Mallorca is the place. And then some weeks after, I met with this friend in Madrid just for some hours. He was going there, I was going there, both of us for some hours. And I told him this, and he was like, oh, I have a place in Mallorca to rent. I'm like, wow, okay. So I came to see it, I liked it, and that's how it was. So yeah, synchronicity.
Nice. Yeah. And so you're enjoying it? So it's a good place to be?
Yes, it's super nice because I'm not in the city. I'm in a town where there's nothing. There's not even a bar or a supermarket or anything like that. So I enjoy enormously living quietly, especially in these times. I don't have to deal with much of the craziness, at least not when I look outside my window or I step foot outside my house.
Yeah, and of course there must be very few tourists around on the island, so which must be that's going to be probably this year and next year the quietest it's ever been, right? Which is one of those things. It's kind of been one of the weird things about this year, hasn't it? Because on the one hand, obviously, we don't need to explain. Everyone knows that's listening to this why it's been a weird year. But then on the other hand, there have been quite enjoyable elements to it in their rarity, like which I've traveled the least. I've traveled in, I don't know, 30 years probably, and that's actually been great.
Same. Yeah.
that like on a personal like sanity level, but also on an environmental level, that's obviously a great thing. Like that I've taken less flights than I ever have, and the fact that that's kind of been forced on me has personally made me think, well, I just don't need to do that. I don't need to travel as much. I was doing it because it was a habit basically, and because I've become used to the fact that I could just book a flight and be in another country, and it's going to cost me £200, and that. So now I'm like, well, I don't really need to do that, and I think that's a really positive thing, So it is, and I guess when you look at where you're living, that's probably going to be a one in a generation event, isn't it? Like the fact that there's so few tourists and you can actually enjoy it in a different way.
Yes, people that have been living here in the island, they say, and they are my age, around 40, they say it's the first summer that this summer reminds them to the summers when they were kids here, that it was just the local people. And this is extremely rare for an island as Mallorca. It's really bad for tourism, of course, because many families live out of it.
Of course.
But it's also very special. It's a very special time as well. And I really like this. I know it's not, again, I'm filled with unpopular opinions today, but I'm very happy. But I'm actually really, I think it's this enforced kind of quiet time we had. I think it's really amazing, and it's something most of us really needed. Despite, of course, I don't want to get in all the economical implications and many of the things that have happened, but just on a personal level of really being able to have that time and space to go inside. Those who wanted it, right? Of course, there are many people who never felt the need, but many of us really used this time to really make this inner journey, right? And really go inside and start thinking about many things we don't usually think. I think it's been a blessing for sure.
Is that how it's been for you? You've been able to work on some things perhaps that you wouldn't have had the opportunity to normally?
Yes, I'm doing that all the time. I'm not going to say it was because of Corona. Like I'm really try to, because I'm the I believe that anything that happens, that it says more, you know, the way I react or anything that is hurting is more about me than about what any other person could have done. So to me, going inside is like the answer to everything. So having this time really crazy enforced of quietness and yeah, I think it was really a blessing. I don't know. I think it's for those who are taking the chance, I think it's a very transformative year. As we were talking before, many people are waking up to new consciousnesses, and many people are waking up to things that, you know, until very recently they thought they were crazy or weird, and suddenly now many more things make sense. So I think it's a very interesting time.
I think if you've got an element, if you're privileged enough to have an element of economic security, and certainly I would put myself in that camp, you know, like I've been very fortunate this year because it's affected my life in certain ways, but it hasn't hugely affected the way that I want to live. You know, I'm still lucky enough to live that way that I want to live. What it's given people that are lucky enough to be in my position is time, really, isn't it? You know, because suddenly you know, when everything locked down for weeks, you know, if I look at friends of mine who, again, are quite middle class, perhaps have the ability to use that time. Yeah, I agree with you. I think they've all, it has been transformational for a lot of people. Even
when you were struggling, of course, I do feel I'm extremely privileged because I still have a place to live and food to eat. So this is, so my basic needs are covered. But of course, it's not that I have like any kind of financial stability. Like all the campaigns that I was doing this year, they all fell off, and many of the things. So every month is kind of a struggle, you know, like, okay, how am I going to do this? How I'm going to figure this out? Like, you know, still in privilege, of course, but I don't know. I do believe as well it's a very special time for transformation and to rethink, you know, many of the things we used to put our money on and you know, I don't know. And time suddenly became as well, I don't know, I think it shifted a little bit our perception on time as well. For some, they complained a lot, and for some, they developed other kind of relationship with time, the quietness and themselves. So of course, being aware of the privilege, but still, even in the struggle, I think it's also, as we were saying before, through the challenge and through the struggle that we can, these opportunities of growth and transformation are created as well.
So has it changed in terms of your working life? Has it changed your focus in any way this year? Have you made any changes that perhaps were driven by this new environment that you found yourself in?
This year, it's probably the year that I made the decision of leaving the job I had for the last 10 years and doing something that I've been wanting to do for the past 3. I don't know if it was because of this year. I don't know if I wouldn't know to say if it was because of the current situation or it was just like it was the phase is over and now I'm starting something new. But it did came up, and it's still, I'm facing tons of challenges regarding this, you know, especially like professional things. But I trust, because I always say every time when you're working for a greater good, the universe always provides. So my last project definitely made me a woman of faith, because the 2 times that I really wanted to quit because of this same reason of not having stability, of not knowing where my next, you know, how I would pay my rent the month after, every time, the 2 big times that I wanted to quit, a miracle happened, like literally a miracle.
So this is when you were working on the original Longboard Crew, and
on Longboard Girls Crew, yes,
and we're trying to get this off the ground, as it were. Like, so what you said, you have faith, like faith in what, serendipity, like the power of the universe to deliver when you need it. Like, how do you define that?
Yes, I believe when you're working for a greater good, for something bigger than yourself, and for something that is affecting positively the lives of so many around the world, the universe somehow finds a way to make it happen, to help me personally to pay my rent and buy food, and to somehow finance the projects that I'm working on. So yeah, it's just the universe provides, especially when you're working for a greater good, or at least that has been my experience in these past 10 years, which does not mean that they did not come with a lot of struggle, like a lot of struggle.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think like the decade you spent doing this is obviously testament to the amount of effort, work, commitment, blood, sweat, tears, presumably that have gone into it. But that's a really positive worldview. Is that have you always thought like that?
No. No. This has been, I feel it's been a 10-year transformation, as well, especially the past 10 years pretty strongly. I always had like the same, I would say, spiritual beliefs or spiritual thoughts, and that there is a greater good, and that everything is energy, and the way we vibrate and resonate affects everything around us. But in this past 10, 8 years, the transformation have been really, really big. And I'm really happy. Again, this does not mean that I don't struggle a lot or face crazy challenges.
I understand.
Yeah,
I understand. It's a nuanced thing, isn't it? It's the word faith, I think, is really relevant, isn't it? Because it is an act of faith. Like it's because what you've, and we should talk about the decade long. I'm going to use the word journey, even though I was trying not to.
It's okay, for me. Yeah.
Fuck, I can't think of another one. But yeah, like we should talk about that. But essentially, it's if you'd have sat down a decade ago and kind of thought, oh, I'm going to do what you ended up doing, it wouldn't, you wouldn't have done that. There's no way you would have sat down and gone like, I'm going to create this community, this organization. I'm going to gather people all around the world based around this activity. You just wouldn't have done it at all. So I think like the fact that you did do it, and it's been a success, and it's led to the venture that you're doing now, which again we'll talk about the NGO. It is in itself quite an act of faith, really, like to actually have the perseverance and the determination to see that through. So I think it is a really interesting word. But before we get into the details of it, you mentioned 2 examples that underlined this faith. So could you talk about those? Like what were those things then?
Yes. So the first one was, I don't remember the year, maybe 2000. We created Longboard Girls Crew in 2010, and this may have been 2014 or 15. That even though the feedback we were getting from around the world was insane, and it was a revolution, and all these girls and women and non-binary people and men, they were all like, it was crazy, the feedback we were getting everywhere was so nice, but I was still struggling so much, like every month again, like how I'm going to buy food, how I'm going to pay my rent. And I've been like this for years. And at some point I told the universe, okay, you know what, like, send me a sign, because to me, this is done. I know with what I've done so far, I could get in any marketing, department of any brand. They will be happy to have me because of, everything we do. Like, but I just cannot keep on going this way. So I said, send me a big sign. 3 days later, I had €3 in my account at that moment. And a couple of days after, I get a phone call from a very big, I should not say, from a very big brand, in the action sports industry.
Yeah. One of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were like, hey, we're looking for a marketing manager to run the European department. And we thought about you. And they offered a super salary. They would pay my moving to another country. It was like super position. And I was like, I had €3 in my account, or I got offered this massive job. I'm like, is this the sign? Is this really the sign? So I was like a little bit confused. So I called at that point one of my mentors, and I tell, hey, so this happened, and I was like, but I don't know. I'm just not feeling it. And the same day that I got that job offer, he tells me, you know what, Val? I believe in you and I believe in your project. So I'm going to do a counter offer. I'm going to give you as a present €10,000. You'll never have to give it back to me. You just have to do this for someone else, because we do now, since that moment, we do a lot of this. We call it karma business. You will have to do this for someone else. And I just want to put that on the table, so that if you don't want to accept that job because you don't feel that is the way you want to go, you don't have to.
Wow.
So the same day, €3 in my account, the same day I got this massive job offer. And then I got my friend saying, I'll give away €10,000 to you. And of course I called the brand and I said, thank you. I just got a little miracle happened. I can't explain. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, so that was the first one in 2014, and then the second one happened in 2016 or something like that. That again, I was like, you know what? Like, I'm quitting. Like, this is enough. And I said, if you're going to send me a sign, and I said to the universe, I don't want a sign, like, I don't want like $2,000 or $5,000, because at that time I had like debt and I was buying the 100% of the company. And I was like, if you're sending me a sign, it needs to be big. 2 weeks after, I get a call from this phone company in France. They wanted to do a campaign with them. I get these phone calls all the time, but you just never, one of maybe 100 gets through. And this one not only got through, but I was laughing because they say, okay, send me a budget. So because I was with this, talk with the universe, I was like, oh, really? So I said like, I don't know, whatever number, like super high. Because I was laughing on the inside because I had nothing to lose anymore. I was like, pfft. So I sent this super high number and they replied to me and they doubled that number. They doubled the number. Like, this never happens, And
wow.
Then I was like, oh, wow. Then maybe, okay, I got the message, So these were, the two miracles that happened every time. The 2 times I wanted to quit.
You got to go in high though, and you got to back yourself high in those situations. That's what I kind of started doing. Like when, if I was faced, like we don't do the same thing, but obviously we both kind of made a living from the industry in particular ways, and we have these transactions and conversations that you just described. I certainly recognize the last one that you talked about, and I just decided just back yourself, like just try and see what your value is and try and kind of say, yeah, no, I think this is what it's worth, and usually they kind of agree with you. That's what I found, because it's all about delivery, isn't it? Like how you deliver it and the confidence you have in your own value. But that you have to kind of like get to a point, I think, to have the confidence to do that, really.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes, I think it's a journey.
The first one helped you probably get there, like that faith that was shown in you. So the Karma business thing, so you've then done a similar thing. You've helped people in the same way.
Yeah, I don't ask for anything in return. They just need to help some other people at some point of their lives. And we've been operating from Longboard Girls Crew this way every time we had money. many, many times, yes. And now, we'll get there. But now with the nonprofit, of course, the same.
Wow, that's great. What a brilliant idea.
Yes, it's beautiful.
Yeah, so it just comes back around basically. And you can, how do you choose, what's the criteria to like for helping people? Is that just an instinctive thing?
It's my heart, yes.
So you just see, it's again like a trust thing, like
there is something just that I feel that is the person I need to help, or something that touches, not everything resonates the same way to everyone. So when something resonates very deeply in me, I know that there is something that I need to do or someone that I need to help if I can. So that's how I do it.
So let's go back to the beginning and you've probably told this story a million times, so I hope you don't mind helping me fill in the blanks for some of my listeners who might not be familiar with it. So 10 years ago, so how did it start, and what was the original, what were you trying to achieve in the beginning?
Well, we were basically wanting to get more girls into longboarding and skateboarding because there were none. This was 2010 in Madrid. I had started longboarding, I think, 2 years before. And we were so used to skating with the guys, which was great. But then once I ran into these other girls, and it was like, oh, this is so fun, And I don't know, we felt that there was not as much pressure for some reason, and it was really, I don't know, the energy was fun and relaxed, and we basically wanted to create more of those moments. So we opened this Facebook fan page called Longboard Girls Crew and started being very annoying with everyone around us to, like the page. This was really another time. This was a time where you reached Facebook. It's crazy, but everything changed so much in 10 years, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to social media and these platforms. So at that time we had crazy reach, you know, and you really reached to everyone that was following you. So it just organically started to grow. A month after we created the page, but organically plus our annoyance, of course. But a month after that, I thought of like, hey, why don't we do a video? You know, to me, it was so logical because I kept seeing like all the guys doing these videos, you know, they got together 3, 4 and they were skating the city. And I was like, I don't think I ever seen that, like a video of women doing that. And it turned out it was the first time that it was ever done anywhere, you know, in the world. Like we were 14 riders from Spain and France. We gathered one day in Madrid and shot our first video, and it was beautifully shot by Juan Rayos, and it just exploded, you know, like everywhere. It's something that it was never done before, which is crazy to think today because there's so much footage now. But at that time, this was never been done before. So yeah, this video started, you know, going around the internet and reaching so many countries we could not believe, because now the concept of reaching countries and reaching people and becoming viral, it's kind of like the everyday thing. But 10 years ago, it was not so much like that. And this video, it happened. It just started going around the world like crazy. And all these people, especially this girl and these women, were seeing this video, and it's like, oh, because we were not doing anything crazy, right? We were just like kind of learning and doing some slides, yes, but really it was something I believe really approachable. So many girls and women identify was like, oh, they can do this. This looks like fun. Let's, you know, get some boards and try as well. So it was really nice to see how women who've never seen representation of other females doing that, suddenly they saw it, and it's like, we can do this too. So that was very cool. Yeah,
because skateboarding, like I'm going to say, like, you know, mainstream skateboarding culture, traditional skateboarding culture, obviously there's a huge community element to that, clearly. But in terms of like the narrative, it is a very progression-based narrative, and it's a very male narrative. It's a very like, you know, this, if you want to be in this world, you have to, there's a level of, you know,
it's extremely exclusive.
It's very exclusive, and it's very hard initially. So the barrier for entry is like really high. And do you think that's why it struck such a chord? Because it was just like the accessibility, like you can do this and all that stuff that you see in you know, like I say, traditional skateboarding culture basically doesn't really matter. That's not what we're doing.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, because I say we were not jumping 20 stairs. We were just cruising the flat around the city and really having a great time. So people, many times, sometimes you need to be able to relate to something to even start thinking that you can also do it. So that's, I think, what we gave, you know, to girls and women with what we did.
Did you, I'm sure you didn't care, but how did that traditional skateboarding culture that we're talking about, was there a reaction from that world? Was there any kind of, this isn't real skateboarding sort of pushback?
Yes, all the time, of course. Yes. Yes. But it's okay. I mean, it's fine. I mean, I don't get into this. Of course, I understand there are two separate sports, longboarding, skateboarding. Some people, even in the longboard world, you know, it's like, oh, you don't go downhill, then, you know, that's not real longboarding. And to me, all that is separation, and I'm not interested in any of that. To me, I really work on just making things as inclusive as possible. Yeah. So, yeah, it's fine. I mean, everyone is entitled to have their opinion, and it's okay with me as well.
I mean, that's why I asked the question, really, not to try and get you to talk about that just on that level, but more because that is, it seems to me, I've always thought this really, it's like, it's one of the ultimate paradoxes at the heart of all these cultures. You know, like on the one hand, it's like, oh, it's so accessible. We're not football, or we're not basketball, and you know, we're so inclusive. But then really, when you get into it, particularly with skateboarding and surfing, that's just actually not true. Like they're as elitist in their own way as any sport you care to mention. You know, surfing can be as elitist as golf. You know,
absolutely.
I don't think that is a stretch to say that. And economically, skiing and snowboarding is certainly as elitist as golf. You know, and I think I always find it when people It's why it's a bit of a joke when people say that there's no, keep politics out of these things, because ultimately, whether you realize it or not, there is politics at play in all of these cultures. And I guess that's why I brought that question up, really, because that is a paradox that I've always thought is like hiding in plain sight, really. And if you don't acknowledge that, you're either very privileged and it's just you've never had to worry about it, or you're kind of delusional, really, because I'd stand by that. I think that is true about those cultures. So I guess that's why, to bring something out which is very pure, which is supposed to be the point, ultimately, it's supposed to be about fucking around and having a laugh and being a community and not caring what you look like or what, all those things. That's why I'm interested in how people reacted, really.
Inside the industry, it was different. There were some people who were really supportive and many people who were not. And it happened even I always say this, it happened even in our own small circles of skating. Everyone was really okay with this until we started to get really big. So suddenly the guys were not so cool with us being as popular because, of course, we didn't skate as good as they did. So there was a lot of that, and there was a lot of resistance from the action sports industry specific. Not the longboarding, I would say, but I would say the action sport. I always tell this story how I was giving at the Eurocima, in Hosegård every year. So I was giving this talk. And they were all the CEOs of all the big companies. All of them, they were there. And I was giving this talk on how to attract the female market. And I basically, told everyone they were doing a horrible job. And, for the way they marketed women and the way they carried, the female marketed products and all these kind of things. And I showed a little bit how we got so many women really, actually, honestly interested in the sport and in the industry. And when I finished, the CEO of one of the biggest companies out there, he approached to me and he said, "Hey, it's very nice and it's very interesting what you're doing, but I just want you to know that we're never going to support you." And this got me really angry. The first day I was like furious because I've been working so much and I was really trying to find support from the industry to keep on going. And then I realized that all these guys, who have been running the industry since its beginnings, they were not willing to give away any kind of power, and we were just giving it away to all the women who wanted. So at that point, I realized, okay, I can keep fighting with this industry that now I know will never let me in, or I can do my own thing, and hopefully many women around the world will resonate with what I'm doing and will want to join. And that's kind of what happened. And I'm very happy it happened. And also I started looking for support outside the action sport industry. That was a great tip as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a few things to say about that, isn't there? Like, the first thing that springs to mind is the action sports industry is behind the times culturally. I mean, like that again, that's a pretty obvious thing to say. But I think you could really see that this year with, for example, the way the debate around Black Lives Matter played out in our little world. I mean, it was actually laughable, really. Like the way that a debate that's been going on in mainstream culture for 40 years, and there's been for 200 years. I mean, fucking hell, if we're really going to get down to it. And is very nuanced, and very clever people all around the world have been, like arguing and debating and pushing things forward. And suddenly action sports decides to have a look at it, and it's like, it was quite, I just found it quite cringy. It was like, this is actually quite a lot bigger than your little world. But the other thing that struck me from when you talk about that is, and it's something that's on the website, I actually wrote it down before we chatting, because representation matters, but the quality of that representation is equally important. And that presumably is why what you've done has been so successful, because it's that's the key point, isn't it? It's like, yeah, you can have a women's team, but what are you saying with that action? What? And I imagine the person that said that to you at SEMA probably, I'm going to guess, might not, if you know what I'm saying. So like, it seems fairly obvious why it was successful, because, like you say, the way that you're trying to communicate it and the way that you're doing it was actually honest and not dependent upon this existing parochial idea that had been the status quo for years.
Absolutely.
I guess off the back of that, the next question would be: has it changed then? Have you seen that attitude that you just summarized with that comment that person made to you in the intervening years? Because it's continued to grow, hasn't it? And now, obviously, it's just an established community. And like you say, you don't need that anymore. Have you noticed that has changed it, or is that attitude still completely prevalent?
There is some progression, I will say, but still, in my experience, every time brands approach to do whatever kind of things, most of the times, I haven't done anything, I would say, in these past months, right? So when everything from BLM happened and everything, because now I guess brands are starting, because they have to, because of purely social pressure, many times not because they believe it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Starting to look for diversity in the people they portray or in their athletes. But most of the time, until this time, like every time I presented, when a brand approached and they wanted to do something, I present them with many options and diversity on ethnically, body shapes, ages, the gender. And people, most of them tend to go always for the white, blonde, thin, young rider. So this doesn't mean that kind of rider is right, because many of these riders, they shred and they shred hard, But when it comes to your question, how I've seen the portrayal changing, I still see so many things that they portray women not as rad or doing as rad things. It's still more portrayed about like the posture, the clothes, the superficial thing instead of the skill. And this is what I work so hard on changing, and what I've been doing these past years. I think, that's one of my big aims.
I had a really interesting conversation with Corey Schumacher. Do you know Corey?
Oh, she's my good friend. I love her so much. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Corey's amazing, obviously.
Yeah.
And she had a really interesting point about the Olympics, which was that for all the arguments you can make about how it's going to be bad for the culture, because, and we all know what those arguments are. It's not something to talk about here. What it's actually going to do, though, is shine the harshest mainstream light on these cultures and really show up how backward they are in a lot of ways, in terms of like how women, LGBT, non-binary like representation is in these worlds. It is still quite far behind. And she said her take was like, I actually think it's really positive, because it will mean there'll be no hiding place. Like when that happens, things will have to change. And I thought that was really interesting in point, because there is still, I think this year has shown like a long way to go, really, isn't there? Not just in our little world, but generally. Does it get for you? I mean, it doesn't sound like you're the sort of person that gets particularly disheartened by fighting the same battles like as you have been doing, but do you still feel positive about it? Like, do you still, or is it hard to maintain the same, in the face of a comment like that? I mean, that's a harsh, I mean, it's almost like a bullying comment, isn't it? To somebody to say that to you, like, I mean, it is, it's essentially like, get back in your box.
It was very aggressive, of course. Yes.
Yeah. So, how do you pick yourself up when you're hearing that like all day long? You know what I mean? Like, as you must have done over this time you've been doing this.
Yeah, well, that was the hardest time, yes. But in general, I always keep positive, because I know that these kind of people and these kind of ways of thinking, their action, they have a due date. I do believe, as we say before, I do believe humanity is waking up, new consciousness are waking up, and what it was acceptable until some years ago, today is suddenly absolutely not, and maybe it takes like movements and things. To me, it was crazy to think, I was watching like everything that happened with Black Lives Matters and many of I don't know, my US people that I know, like suddenly realizing this issue. And to me, it was crazy. Like, really, you've never noticed that there was racial injustice? Like, seriously? To me, this is crazy, you know? So
yeah, that blew my mind as well. I actually was like, you know, people posting things going like, I had no idea. And I was like, yes. Really?
No,
like,
it's so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the true extent of privilege. But then on the flip side, you know, you've now got people that are basically claiming it actually doesn't exist, you know, like and claiming that, you know, the concept of privilege is flawed, and, you know, it's all critical race theory and all this bullshit, obviously. But yeah, I guess
there's going to be a lot of that, and there are going to be a lot of people who are still. I mean, we get the same comment when it comes to women, right? Like they say, oh no, but you actually have it better. Like you get sponsors not skating before, you're less. Like, you know, all these things. There are many, you know, things. You know, we get shit about, or, you know, when it comes to privilege and what is privilege, what is not. There's so many conversations. Honestly, it's so much all the time, everything to me. I really, after that thing that happened with that guy telling me this, that is the moment that I decided I'm not going to fight anymore, because I'm investing all the energy I have. I want to invest all the energy I have in creating. I don't want to invest in fighting anymore. So that's what I've been doing. So every time there's like, of course, I make statements when things are important to me. And of course, we are very strongly in positioning our movement, me personally, and the whole movement positioning in a lot of political different issues, or human issues, or racial issues. But again, I don't want to fight. I just want to create and vibrate and keep it high.
So how is the movement now, like 10 years down the line? Like, how can you characterize it?
It's a movement on its own. It's like, honestly, I see it like your kid grew and it has life on its own, and it's now there's so many movements and so many women and so many, I don't know, it's just beautiful to see and to witness. And it was insane to think about this 10 years ago. So now that I see that it's already a thing and it's happening, now it's when I feel that I can retire, you know, sort of, you know, it's like, okay, then no one needs me anymore. Like I can go and do something else. So
yeah,
that's a little bit how I feel.
Yeah. And like we were saying before we started recording, so you've literally moved to the new role now. So so when did you set up the NGO? Was that 3 years ago, did you say?
Yes, in 2017 I created it, but this year is the first year that I'm really like we have running projects, but most of the projects so far have been running out of me asking a lot of favors to a lot of people. So it's like, you know, to all my friends who have brands, like, can you please send me 10 boards to India? Can you please, you know, like send shoes to Malaysia? So this is the way we've been operating so far. But now our programs became really, really professional. And at the moment, I'm looking for the funding for this. We have 6 running projects for next year so I'm very excited about that. And I'm looking forward to making it happen.
So what kind of projects are you working on? Like what?
So we have a project in India. We've been working for many years now. There's a center there of parents. Maybe some of them are in jail, some of them are drug addicts. So we have 120 kids, girls mostly, and we have so twice a week we teach them how to skate. Twice a week there's music programs, arts program, crafts program, and also sexual and period education. This is extremely taboo in most of these countries. So, yeah, this is beautiful. In Malaysia, we have the Wolfpack Skate Girls. So it started as a group of girls to start skating. Malaysia is a really complicated country when it comes to girls and women, because they are really seen as fourth-class citizens. And it's crazy, the inequality over there. So we created it as a group as a safe space for girls to start skating. And some of the great consequences that we were not expecting were that boys and men are seeing these girls skating and they're changing the perception they have of girls and women. So this is beautiful to happen. We have a project in Belgium gathering kids from the refugee center, because there's a lot of stigma and racism around refugees, especially in these small towns, you know. So we are trying to get the kids from the local kids with the refugee kids and gather them and make them skate together. We have a project in Chile with disabled kids, adapting skateboards and any kind of boards for them. And what else? We are supporting a project in Ghana, creating the first skate park in Ghana and a kind of a house Airbnb as well. We're supporting Surf Ghana and Skate Gal Club, which is a beautiful project that I love. So, that are some of the projects.
So how do you find the projects? Do people like come to you, or is it just from the work you've been doing previously?
Half and half. Some of them approach to me because they know what I'm doing, and we see if we can collaborate. And some of them we've created ourselves from people. I don't know, the project in Belgium. I got a call from this lady Marcela from El Salvador. She had to flee El Salvador because she was being there's a lot of gang violence over there. So if you don't pay them, you need to. So it's very complicated. And she told me her story, how she got out of a aggressive marriage thanks to longboarding and our videos, and her mother giving her a board, and this really empowered her. So she really felt stronger and left this person. And then through longboarding, she found her new partner, and then they had to flee from El Salvador to Belgium as refugees with all their kids. And she wrote me a message from the refugee center in Belgium telling me her story. And of course, I read that email and I was like, let's do something, in tears. And that's how we created this project. Some of them, they come to me. Some of them, I go to them. It's how it has to happen.
And what ambitions do you have for it then? Like long term? Do you want to keep growing it and develop it in the same way that you develop the original movement, or
yes, absolutely, it's different, because one thing is like growing communities and creating these safe spaces for women, and the non-profit, it's really focused. All the programs are really like humanitarian. There's like there are programs that are developed, it's not so we have all this education and there's a lot of things happening with the program. So of course what I want is so for this next year, we have 6 programs we want to develop in 6 different countries. My ambition would be have as many programs as possible in as many countries as possible. There's so many people who need all sorts of help, but mostly our help is mostly focused on healing the soul. We work with people in super vulnerable communities. We work with people that have gone through extreme trauma. So to us, what I wanted to do is bring this joy and this empowerment that longboarding really, it changed and shifted my life. I was in such a dark place and it really changed everything. So I wanted to bring this love and empowerment and change of the self-esteem, to these kids and women who have gone through the unimaginable for us. And afterwards, of course, the programs got bigger, and now it's not just about the skateboarding or the longboarding, but about all the other things that we do. But it's really focused on healing the soul. To me, that's what we bring. It's not just about having the food or this. It's to me, it's more this about healing the soul.
And that originally comes from your own transformative experience personally of the power of the change that it gave you.
Yes, because I think it's so powerful and it really changed my life. So I was like, we need to bring this to as many people as possible. And if through this tool that we can affect positively even more, because Longboard Girls Crew was already a social project. It was always a social project. But the nonprofit, the humanitarian kind of mission, it's really now going through the most vulnerable, because I don't know, I feel if it done so much for me, maybe it can do the same for many people, right?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm just interested in your case, like, why longboarding? Like, what was it? Like, where did it come from?
So I don't know. I guess I was always kind of interested in action sports, and I don't know. I did kind of like aggressive inline skating when I was a teenager, but it was not until I was 28 that I started longboarding. I wanted to. I was like, oh, longboarding. I don't know. Again, it's some things that, there are some things that just come to your mind and they stick. And then I had a friend who was touring with different bands, and there's this Australian band, hardcore band that I love called Parkway Drive, and they were touring around Spain, and they couldn't pass their board on security at the airport, so he left it to my friend, and my friend was like, hey, I got a longboard for you, you know. So when he came to Madrid, he brought it to me, and that's actually how I started longboarding at 28.
More serendipity. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah. So with the change that you've just made to kind of focus fully on the NGO, was that something that you personally were ready for, that change? Like, because, you know, it's a long time, 10 years to dedicate your life to something as you have done. And especially considering the battles that you've described and, you know, the whole situation that you've been through to get it to this point. So did you feel like it was ready for a change personally, like to shift your focus?
Yes, it was not easy, of course, because after 10 years of such a successful project that definitely changed my life for sure and has an impact that I don't think I can ever measure, somehow I feel that I identify a lot, like a lot of my self-perception is very linked to many of the things that I've done in this project. So letting go of that is also a little bit, not dying to a part of me, but really letting go to a part of me. I think it's a very interesting ego process, you know, to let go of that and just start new with something very small. And but I feel ready, and I'm actually excited. You know, it's sometimes phases. I don't know if I was ready 2 years ago. I feel that I'm definitely ready now. So I'll announce. Originally, I was going to announce it this week, like publicly. I think I will do next week. So, but I think this is not going to come in 2 days. So it's not going to come out in 2 days. Yeah.
Could do.
Hola. So, but yeah, I think on Monday I'll publicly announce my retirement.
I'll bring it out on Monday. There we go.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, no, the word ego, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's difficult to know when to move on, especially when you've created something that's really personal to you. You know, it's just as a life skill. It is really hard, isn't it? And I've certainly been in those situations where there's a fear involved, isn't there? You know, fear of the unknown. It's like, oh Jesus, what's that going to mean? Like, who am I if I don't do that?
Absolutely.
You know?
Who am I if I don't do that? That is the question. Yeah. Yes.
And it's a hard one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But I think, I don't know. On the other hand, I have the nonprofit, and there is this voice inside me that I've always listened to. That this voice is saying it's okay. It's on this way. So I trust this voice, and this voice always guides me in perfectly in my life path. So even though it's scary, I'm still doing it because I believe it's the right thing to do for me now.
And was that because you felt like you were getting too comfortable or too associated with it personally?
Yeah, I guess at some point as well, there is something when you don't get. I mean, it's hard on one hand because we have. To me, it's really like family. Like we have all the ambassadors. We are like 90 ambassadors from all around the world, and we're really close. And we talk every week and from all over the world. And we're really family and loving and supportive. And, you know, it's so, to me, this is so special, you know, and it's not just about this perception and the ego and everything, but it's really, I always tell them I'm not going anywhere. But when I told them on our WhatsApp group, like, hey, so this is happening, it was very strong and it was a little bit like going to your own funeral, you know, like all these people saying these things. And it's like, okay, like I'm not dying, but still it was really, really emotional. But I think, again, I think it's time. And sometimes I guess when you start not getting as excited about certain things, and when certain things starts to be more of a drag, I think it's signs that this phase is starting to, you know, you need to move on somehow. And
it's not an easy thing to listen to, that, is it? You know,
no.
Like it takes courage, I think, sometimes to listen to that and kind of not ignore it, because there can be an element, can't there, of like, oh, gonna ignore
No,
that.
for sure. We don't always hear what we want to hear. And it's not always, we like to be comfortable and, and in the known. But so it's but I always, also I've been working many years on the detachment of things. That's why I went living without a house. And that's, I don't know, I worked for many years on the detachment of things. And I think this is a great exercise as well.
As in purposefully living with few possessions? Or...
Yes, and without a house.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you about that because that's obviously, you said you did that for how long? Like
3 years.
And that was a conscious decision to do that.
Absolutely. Yes, because I just broke up with someone. I moved to France, I don't know, 2016 or something. And then a year after, that relationship ended and I didn't feel like going back to Spain. But of course, I didn't feel like staying in France because French. No, I'm kidding. I mean, half of. I'm not completely.
Hey, we're all Europeans. We're all allowed to slag each other off.
No. Okay. So and at that time, I always tell this story how I was reading what today is my favorite book by Deepak Chopra. It's The Way of the Wizard, and there was something that they say there's all these comparisons about Merlin teaching Arthur how to become a king, but a king by soul, right? And he said, and the book said something like, for you humans, you build houses to protect yourself from the outside world. But for a wizard, home is the moment, and moment is always moving in the path of time. And I read that and I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's make me home, And that's what I did for 3 years. And I can say they were the best 3 years of my life. And there was no fear. I only knew 2 weeks in advance where I was able to stay the upcoming weeks. But there was never fear. There was never, I don't know. I always felt so guided and free. And I had a little bag with my longboard, my skateboard, and some winter clothes and summer clothes. And this is all I had. And it was amazing. Really amazing.
So what was it that made you decide to go back to living with a house?
I just felt that phase was over. I've learned everything that I had to, or I felt that I had to. And the same way now that I feel that a phase is becoming to an end. Suddenly it's not so exciting. Suddenly you just feel that you want to do something else. And I wanted to properly develop all the programs for the nonprofit and go through this shift. I'm going through like letting go LGC, getting into the nonprofit, many other personal changes that I'm going through. So I felt that I wanted to be at the same place all the time. Afterwards, I moved here, and then I in 1 year I was only here 3 months. So this I will say too. But
you ended up doing it anyway.
Yeah. But it's nice I feel very privileged to have a place to go back. It's stupid, but to have a bed and to have your towel and to have a living room and a kitchen and it feels glorious, like every morning I'm so grateful and I'm so happy that I have this, and I have even a little room that I have my little office where I can see all the trees and the birds from out, and I can work super inspired and aligned with what I believe is love and truth. So I don't know, I feel very grateful for this phase as well.
I mean, it sounds like you're just trying to live in the way that's the most honest to yourself. And I'm using the word honest in the, the significant sense, like actually, because being personally honest with yourself is very difficult, as we all know. And we all try and do it, don't we, to a degree. But to actually follow it through in the way that you've done on a lot of levels is quite rare, I would say. Has that been almost like the guiding thing behind it, like to understand yourself to that degree, with that degree of honesty? Like, what? Because before you answer, let me just sort of contextualize it a little bit more as well, because there's a lot of expectations on women. Let's be honest. There's a lot of set roles for women. There's a lot of like, here's what you do at this age. Here's what you do at this age. Traditionally, patriarchally, and it's interesting when obviously when you reject that, which is clearly what everybody should do, because people should be free to live the way they want to live, with honesty and in the way that suits them, it's still quite rare, isn't it? And it's still not something that's that common, I would say, particularly in your classic sort of Western culture. So is that something that's been part of this for you, like attaining that level of honesty?
Yes, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I would call it as well coherence.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that probably makes much more sense. Yeah.
Because
honesty carries weight, doesn't it, in a certain way? Yeah.
Yes, coherence with what I believe and with my values, and with most of the time I encounter, because I'm also this way, like, I don't know, like of course I don't buy clothes. I only buy once a year secondhand clothes. Of course I don't know, I don't consume any kind of plastic. So I get out of my way to only buy like local things without, in a bulk. Like I do my own products, like my own, like I don't buy anything. I just use everything, that I make out of, so I really try to be conscious of everything that I need, of everything that I use, and really align to what I believe is the way I would like to live in the world. But this, of course, comes with a lot of struggle, because firstly and foremost, you're a pain in the ass to everyone. So every time you go out, I don't know if you go out to eat or something, I'm always the person with my cutlery or with my straw or with my jar. Like, please just put it here. If not, if this place doesn't, I can't eat there. And, so of course I'm really a pain in the ass to most of the people around me who don't live according to the same values that I have. Or maybe many people have these values, but they struggle to put them in practice, right? But to me, living in this coherence is what keeps me aligned. And if I'm not aligned, what am I doing? If I'm not aligned with what I believe is the way I want to live my life and my life path, to me, it doesn't make any sense living any other way. So to me, it's not hard. To me, it's just some adaptations here and there. But to me, this is what makes sense. And this is as well what makes me happy, even though sometimes it's way more challenging than the mainstream way of doing things.
Yeah. I just think it's still quite rare, and I think, I'm just hearing your story and hearing the decisions that you've made, like that, the words you use make sense, definitely, because it's about learning, understanding, and being truthful, isn't it, to the way that you think you should live, which is, you make it sound quite straightforward, but I don't think it can be that straightforward for everybody a lot of the time. Because it's, I guess that's why I use the word honesty, because I meant it in the context of self-honesty, and being truthful to what you believe.
Yes,
and there's a lot of pressures that lead you away from that, aren't there?
Yes, because also not only the social commands are really leading you to the way of not living with this kind of coherence or honesty, but also, of course, yes, I see many, not just in myself, but in many people around me. It's I always say it's easier for people to defend the lie they live in than accept that there is another truth, or there is a truth that it's not the one that they understand as it. I don't know if that made sense what I said, but I think it's hard to be honest and coherent, because most people will defend the lie. Then it takes a lot of courage, of course, to live. And I come from a really complicated place. Like, I'm Armenian. I come from an Armenian family, extremely male dominated and patriarchal, and I've gone through many strong things in my life. I've gone through many addictions and eating disorders, and I've been lost most of my life until this beautiful transformation started happening 10 years ago. So I don't know. I know the struggle, but I don't know. I think it's beautiful to see that it's through this struggle as well, and understanding why things happen, that we can actually thrive in love. To me, that's the only way I see things, and that's the way that I try to live my life, and sharing this and doing these things for others as well, because I feel so privileged now. Like I always say, I don't conceive living in privilege and not working for those who don't have it. Like, I don't understand that. So how can we not, to me?
So I guess my final question would be this transformative power that these activities have, like in your case, longboarding, is that why they're such powerful vehicles to kind of create the social change that you're interested in creating at this point, because of what they give to the individual and the way that they can shift this self-perception?
I think these are tools. I always say my tool to start was skateboarding and longboarding. I think there are many tools to bring transformation to people. I don't think it's just something. Of course, I think longboarding and skateboarding are fantastic and beautiful, but I think everything can be a tool to help people thrive and to help people heal and to bring joy to people. So I always say I use this one because this is the one I know and this is the one I have. But we all have one. We can all do something. We can all, create something with whatever it is that we have or we know. So at the end, the tools, I don't think they matter so much. I think what matters the most is our intention and how we do things. So, yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much. I really, really enjoyed that. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you, for sure. Thank you for having me, of course.
So there you go. That was my chat with Valeria, and I hope you enjoyed it. I mean, it's a great one, isn't it? I was really impressed by the equanimity Valeria has obviously consistently displayed, and the way she's chosen to rise above it all, to choose kindness and positivity wherever possible. I've put the links to her Instagram and various work in the show notes on my website. So get yourself over, plug time, to www.wearelooking.sideways.com to find out more about Valeria and to follow the links if you want to find out more about some of the other things we've discussed. While I'm doing this bit, if you're listening, watching on YouTube, because I do have a YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening via your usual podcast platforms, then make sure you subscribe there. And also, fuck it, I'm on nearly 9,000 followers on Instagram, which is not enormous. I understand that, but it's nearly 10,000. So if you do fancy helping me hit that milestone, you can find me at We Look Sideways. Give us a follow. Go on then. All right, housekeeping corner time. Yes, thank fuck those other lightweights have signed off and it's just us diehards left. So the main news from my side, as I alluded to at the beginning of the show, is that we've had a breakthrough with the book, the Looking Sideways book, which I've been talking about for it's definitely over a year. It's going to happen. Basically, I've agreed a sponsorship deal with Vero, the social network I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, which is going to mean I can swerve the entire Kickstarter thing and just get the book out. And even more excitingly, the deal also means we've been able to expand the scope of the book, which is great because it means we've now got contributions from lots of past podcast guests, including Chaz Smith, Lauren Hill, Rob Machado, Jeff Johnson, Cersei Wallace, Annie Fast, Ben Mundy, Craig Peterson, and loads more. Ed Lee, he's chipped in. And it means we can give even more of a platform to Owen's amazing photos, which was the entire point of the book in the first place. It's looking great. Owen's done a brilliant job on the design and obviously the photography. I've been taking care of the words and the editing. And we're both pretty happy to get this thing out in the world. Now, as you'll know, if you've been listening to Looking Sideways for a while, my podcast is unusual. I'm probably the only one that doesn't actually have any sponsors, really. And deciding whether to work with different sponsors has been something I've discussed on the show over the years. I mean, obviously, I work with Patagonia on Type 2, which is a really specific thing, which I've talked about a lot. But in the main, I've turned down all offered deals in the past. So bit of a departure for me to decide to work with Vero on the book. I mean, there's a few reasons why I've made this call, really. Firstly, because it's a book. Pretty obvious thing to say, but it's a big, enormous investment of time and effort. And, me and Owen need to make sure it gets paid for somehow. I've been lucky enough to have quite a few books published over the years. So I do speak about this from a position of some experience. And basically, your options if you're going to try and get a book published are get a publisher. Been lucky enough to do that a few times over the years, but it's not for me anymore. Basically, when you get a deal with a publisher, they just give you a loan effectively to pay for the book, and then you pay that loan back through any sales. And they also give you an enormously stressful deadline, and you have to give up a lot of control. So to be honest, that one was out. I did have a meeting with a lovely agent a while back who listens to the show, so hello if you're listening, who offered to work with me on developing a Looking Sideways book concept, but that would have required me basically writing a book up front, which would have then got shopped around to publishers with no guarantees that it'd ever get picked up. I mean, that wasn't happening. So then, your options are paying for it yourself, which is something we did talk about. I mean, we're not minted, me and Owen, but we probably could have scraped together enough to get a short run going. But then that's quite a risk. And to be honest, I've basically fronted the cash for this podcast since day one by the decision never to work with any sponsors. So I was kind of fucked if I was going to do it on the book. So then your options are crowdfunding, which we also considered. And that's basically a good way of securing enough pre-sales to pay for the print run. And I've got to be honest, the thought of doing a Kickstarter made my heart sink a little bit. They can be really successful and they can be executed brilliantly, like my friend John Weaver's just done with his anti-blueprint project. Absolutely smashed his target, as you'll know if you follow me on Instagram, because I've talked about that a little bit over there. But essentially, if you're doing a Kickstarter, you're doing 2 massive rounds of effort. You're doing the promo to get it made, and then when you make the thing, you're doing promo for that as well. Which led to this final option, which is getting a brand or sponsor to front the cash in return for an association with the project, which is the option we've gone for with Vero. And the deal that we struck with Vero is such that we have total creative control over it. And they're just going to help us get it out there and promote it. I don't have the full details of what that looks like yet, mainly because we haven't made them up. But when we do sit down and work that out, I will, of course, be setting spam levels to 11 across my various comms channels. And you're going to be fucking sick of hearing about this book. It's just the way it goes, isn't it? But that's what's going to happen. It means we can publish it. We can get some out. And concentrate on making the book as good as possible rather than worrying about paying for it and promoting it. Of course, there's a few ethical considerations when it comes to choosing sponsorship. And in the age of the social dilemma and all that, of course, I did consider whether I was happy to work with yet another social network. But as I explained the other week, I'm on Vero. It's ad-free. It's algorithm-free. There's no data harvesting. It's a pretty friendly space where people are just sharing links, films, books, etc., which is pretty much all I do on social media anyway. So, I've gone for it, basically. So I probably don't sound that stoked on it. But yeah, we're really stoked on it. It's looking brilliant. We were going to try and get it out for Christmas, but in the end, that's never going to happen. So we've stopped worrying about that. It's going to be ready when it's ready. That's about as much as I can say. If you're interested, the best way of getting updates is to get me on Instagram, or you can sign up to my newsletter, which you can do via my website, www.wearelookingsideways.com. Or there's a link to that through my bio on Instagram. So, yeah, there you go. Book happening. Looking great. It's about 300 pages. Mental. Of course, that Rich Roll fella had to steal my thunder, didn't he? Announcing his book in the same week. Yeah, nice one. But yeah, whatever. It's going to be good. So, if you're interested, get yourself a copy when it's out. Elsewhere, I've been working with a couple of other friends on some plans for a Looking Sideways event platform. Now, of course, I am aware that you couldn't choose a worse time in human history to try and launch an event, given that the entire concept of people gathering in one place is about to be cancelled for yet another few months. Yes, I am recording this the day after lockdown was announced in the UK. But it's been fun chatting it over regardless. And I think we've got a good idea on our hands for that. So again, I'll be discussing it on the show and in other spots when the time is right. All right, that's it for me for this week. I'll be back next week with the latest episode of Type 2. And then normal service, i.e. weekly episodes coming out, should be resumed because I've got quite a few lined up. Nice one. See you then.